Chapter 1106, Making Contact. Returning to the real world, Klein immediately took out a pen and paper and wrote a short letter. Investigate the nameless island which led to the deaths of Grimm, William, and Polly. This can be done through the descendants of Edwards, Benjamin Abraham, and the descendants of the three deceased. This was a letter to Queen Mystic Bernadette, so Klein didn't write the reason. He believed that she would understand what this meant. After folding the letter, Klein casually found a candle and began the summoning ritual. After completing the setup, he placed the letter on the altar, took 2 steps back, and recited in ancient Hermes,
I summon in my name, an invisible creature that roams the upper realms, a strange spiritual body that is friendly to humans, a messenger that belongs solely to Bernadette Gustave.
The moment he said that, Klein's spiritual perception was triggered. He instinctively activated his spirit vision with a mere thought. However, he didn't see anything. Then, he discovered that the letter placed on the altar had disappeared.
Queen Mystic's messenger is very special. Next time, I'll switch to using my spirit body thread's vision.
Klein was stunned for a second before he sighed inwardly. In the evening, under the illumination of the street lamps that lit up one after another, a carriage drove to the intersection of the Backland Bridge area in East Borough and stopped by the side of the streets. Wearing a long dress and a dark cloak, Fours paid the fare of 3 soldi before alighting from the rental carriage. She walked slowly along the shadows of the street, preparing to make a large detour to escape from her imaginary stalker. At the end of the previous tarot gathering, she had swiftly overcome her laziness, packed up, and went out to visit her former teachers, classmates, and colleagues. As for the reason, there was no need for a special reason. It was very normal to care about friends and acquaintances after an air raid. And the reason why it wasn't last week was because, in the eyes of the ordinary citizens, the situation in Backland was especially tense. There could be a new round of attacks at any moment, so everyone naturally tried their best not to leave the house. During the visit, Forrest had originally planned on diverting the topic onto the strange tales at the hospital, but to her surprise, there was no need for her to do so at all. Her former teachers, classmates, and colleagues would usually chat about such matters on their own accord after some idle chatter, making one convinced that such illusions happened at every hospital. No, Forrest knew that it wasn't an illusion, so she inexplicably felt horrified, suspecting that she would have nightmares at night.
I don't have to make any major changes at all. As long as the patient's miraculous recoveries are changed to them having their physical wounds healed, only to have them go bonkers, it would make for an excellent horror story. Furthermore, it happens in a city that everyone is familiar with and also in the hospital, that people often come into contact with in the city but exudes a terrifying atmosphere. It will result in perfect immersion. I can almost foresee another best-selling novel about to be born. I just don't know if I can write this genre well. The only problem is that this story will lack sufficient emotion. A female patient passionately kissing a face that's covered in mushrooms and weeds, isn't that way too outlandish?
Forrest walked as she thought, entering a creative state of mind. At this moment, her vision blurred. She saw a figure walk out from the shadows in front of her, where the gas lamps couldn't illuminate. Ah! The figure wore a black trench coat and a half-top hat. He had a deep-set face with cold facial features. Apart from his gold-rimmed glasses, he looked identical to the crazy adventurer of the 5 Seas, Gehrman Sparrow. Although Forrest knew that Mr. World wouldn't hunt her and was here to fulfill the contract, she couldn't help but tense up. It was as though she had met her strictest teacher from back in her school days.
Good evening.
Her footsteps slowed down, but she still continued moving forward and greeted him. Klein nodded without a word. He turned around and walked into a secluded alley to the side. The gas lamps inside were already damaged, so it was dark. Despite the dark environment, Forrest similarly didn't say a word. She lowered her head slightly and followed behind Gehrman Sparrow at an adequate pace. When they reached the depths of the alley, Klein looked around and said in a deep voice,
Help me ask your teacher if he knows of this person. Benjamin Abraham. If he knows him, I want all his information and all the text and pictures he left behind.
Okay.
Fours was nervously waiting for Mr. World to teleport her somewhere else, but she never expected him to mention something else for no reason. She nearly failed to react. She didn't ask why, and quickly nodded in agreement, as though she couldn't wait to do it. Then she took a deep breath and continued waiting for Gairman Sparrow to approach her. He grabbed her shoulder and began teleporting. But after a few seconds, nothing happened. Fours looked up in shock, only to see Mr. World still standing in front of her, looking at her. She then heard him say in a deep voice,
Write it now.
Write it now. I didn't bring any paper, a pen, envelope, or stamp with me.
Fours didn't ask why, as she subconsciously said, Asia. Before she could finish her sentence, the 4 items were thrown at her. Fours caught the items and took a few steps out. Using the gas lamps at the end of the alley, which opened up to the roads and the hard wall, she quickly wrote the letter to her teacher, Dorian Gray Abraham. With both hands in his pockets, Klein waited patiently without any signs of impatience. In fact, he had long been lurking around Miss Magician without showing himself. According to the address Force provided, he had been secretly monitoring her from the moment she left home in the afternoon. His monitoring was done by getting his marionettes to pray to sea god Calvetua from time to time, while his actual body stayed above the gray fog, using the prayer light dots to observe the situation around the magician. With the help of his true vision, Klein was currently certain that Zeratul hadn't targeted Miss Magician. Thus, it was safe to make contact with her. After knowing that Miss Magician had met Zeratul's marionette, how could he be at ease and be daring enough to meet her and take her traveling? Now he was certain that Zeratul had been attracted by the Abraham family's sealed artifact or Saint of Secrets Botis. As for a mere Sequence 6 like the magician, she wasn't worthy of notice. Hence, she wasn't exposed. Hi, Vos. A few minutes later, Fours finished writing. She used a sticky herbal powder she carried with her to seal the envelope and pasted the stamp.
Do I throw it into the mailbox now?
Force glanced at the cover of the letter with her teacher's address and real name and asked hesitantly, Hi, Miwan. She felt that she had to do it herself. She couldn't hand it over to the world, or it might bring danger to her teacher. Of course, if Gairman Sparrow insisted, Force felt that there was nothing she could do. Even if she tore the letter apart, there was still a possibility of her being hypnotized or having her spirit channeled. Klein nodded indiscernibly.
Return after you're finished posting it.
Phew. Fours let out a long sigh of relief. Turning around, she ran towards the street and found the mailbox. Box. After finishing all of this, she returned to the dark alley. Without waiting for Gairman Sparrow to speak, she handed over the fountain pen and the remaining 2 stamps. She very quickly said,
One was enough.
Klein gave Miss Magician a look before he took the stamp and pen, and calmly said,
This means that your teacher's residence is less than 100 kilometers from Backland.
Force's expression froze.
What's the big deal? I also know that your teacher lives in Pritz Harbor, and there's a high chance that he hasn't moved away yet. As for why I gave you 3 stamp tickets, of course it was intentional.
Klein muttered to himself before taking a few steps forward to stand in front of Miss Magician. He then reached out his left hand that was wearing a transparent glove and grabbed the lady's shoulder. Force subconsciously lowered her head again. The surrounding colors immediately became saturated and layered while countless, indescribable figures flashed. When the things in color she saw returned to normal, Force instinctively raised her head to thank him. However, Gairman Sparrow had already disappeared. Force sized up her surroundings in a daze and realized that she was standing in an empty corner. In front of her was a door, and a din and the smell of alcohol were emitted from beyond the door. Force pulled at her cloak and walked out the door with a hint of fear, only to see many men dressed as pirates. They had scimitars and guns, either hanging or lodged by their waist. While drinking hard liquor, they discussed the strengths of the fleets of Fasak and Lowen in high spirits. Quite a number of beautifully dressed women were amongst them, like dancing butterflies. She was wearing a long, dark-colored cloak in a Backland style. Her brown hair was long and slightly curled. She had a rather mature temperament, but her expression of fear made it seem like Fors was a lamb that had barged into a wolf pack. It was so disharmonious and eye-catching, and it quickly attracted the attention of many. She felt a little familiar with what those people had said to her. It was as if they were part of a language branch she had learned, but she couldn't understand them immediately.
Where am I? What am I doing? Who are they?
As Fors was at a loss, a plump man squeezed over and said in broken Lowenese,
Tin Sully, one night.
Fors had been involved in many of the Beyonder circles over the years. Although she didn't know where she was, she knew very well what kind of situation she was in. The light in her eyes flickered strangely before they converged into one point. An indescribable aura emanated from her body, making the people around her subconsciously avoid her gaze. Berserk Sea, Theros Island. Denetz hid in the shadows, watching the intelligence peddler, Bartz, in a serious manner. Chapter 1107. Relax. As a hunter who had Shadow Cloak, Donetz's hiding and monitoring abilities were always pretty good. Back then, he had even helped Gehrman Sparrow lay an ambush for Steel Moretti. At this moment, he didn't show any traces of himself, but he felt a little bored. He was eager for Anderson to switch with him as soon as possible.
When will such a life end? Vice Admiral Ailment, hurry up and appear. No, not now. It's better to wait until Anderson arrives.
Danitz did some introspection and rationally ended his prayer. He was worried that a pirate admiral at Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy would discover that he was hiding in the dark, and he lacked the courage and confidence to deal with her. Of course, if he wore the boxing glove, everything wouldn't be a problem. As long as he made the decision fast enough, fear and apprehension wouldn't be able to catch up to him. Suddenly a voice rang beside Donitz's ear.
You seem very troubled.
Danitz jumped out of the shadows in shock as an orange flame quickly formed in his hand, Hace Jai. At the same time, he cast his gaze to the source of the voice. He saw Anderson hiding in the woods. There were green vines stuck to his head that seemed to meld him with the environment.
Dog shit.
It was unknown if Danitz was cursing Anderson or himself. After venting his anger, he asked,
When did you come? 2 minutes ago. You hid well. I didn't manage to find you immediately, so I followed your hiding habits and casually asked you a question.
Anderson replied with a smile. Vror. Danitz was momentarily unsure if he should be proud or angry. He asked with mixed feelings.
If I had remained calm just now, would you have failed to discover me? In theory. But as an experienced hunter, there can't be only one way.
Anderson said with a smile, completely unfazed. Just as Danitz was about to ask what other solutions there were, he suddenly saw Bartz extinguish the candle and prepare to sleep. Minutes later, the figure of intelligence peddler, Bartz, appeared by the window in the darkness. With a nimble leap, he landed into the shadows outside the house. That was where Danitz had been hiding. Having re-entered the shadows, he was almost stepped on by his target. Heyo. Bartz walked towards the sea under the cover of the shadows.
Dog shit.
Only then did Danitz appear, giving Bartz the middle finger. Anderson also left the woods. As he pulled out the branches from his head, he smiled at Danitz.
I think we'll hit the jackpot tonight.
Danitz glanced at the strongest hunter in the Fog Sea and nodded vigorously.
I hope it's Vice Admiral Ailment.
He used the shadows that were everywhere at night and immediately took the lead in following the intelligence peddler, along with Anderson. They maintained a perfectly adequate distance.
Not too stupid.
Anderson observed for a moment before chuckling. Danitz scoffed inwardly but didn't respond. He knew very well that this wasn't an occasion where they could afford to mock and provoke each other. 15 minutes later, Bartz arrived at the beach and stood there, staring at the dark blue sea under the crimson moonlight. He didn't wait too long. In the darkness of the sea, a huge outline appeared, gradually forming a black ship with a white flag fluttering in the air. On the flag, two ghostly blue flames burned within a pitch-black skull. The Black Death. Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy's flagship, Black Death. Danitz instantly became excited. If not for his shadow form, his pupils definitely would have dilated in a bid to draw in more light to see every detail of the ship. He subconsciously moved a distance forward, hoping to confirm if Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy was on the ship. As the gigantic sailboat approached, the two people in the shadows could see sailors busy on the deck.
Is there a dock for docking here? Or will they just give Bartz a dinghy and get him to row himself over?
Just as these thoughts flashed through Danitz's mind, he heard Anderson say with a suppressed voice,
"Leave."
Danitz's greatest strength was that he was good at following the instructions of an authoritative figure. Be it in front of Edwina Edwards or Gehrman Sparrow, he would follow the instructions to a T, apart from grumbling at most. At that moment, although his face was filled with puzzlement, with the intention to retort and persist in his own plans, he still used the shadows to silently leave the beach. When they could no longer see the Black Death and could only hear the vague crashing of the waves, did Danitz leave the shadows and appear in the forest. He hurriedly asked,
"Aren't we going to confirm if Vice Admiral Ailment is aboard?"
Anderson sized up Danitz and chuckled.
Never underestimate a beyonder, who's very famous at sea but has lived to this day. Every pirate admiral is a target you must be careful against. You must never be careless.
Danitz subconsciously replied,
Admiral of Blood, Senor, Admiral Hell Ludwell.
They were all pirates who were easily killed by a particular crazy adventurer. Ha ha see. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Hassi at a loss for words to rebut Danitz with. After a few seconds, he said,
So isn't Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy worth paying more attention to, considering how she survived Gehrman Sparrow's attack?
After careful thought, Danitz inexplicably felt that Anderson's words made sense. Just as he was about to speak, his throat suddenly felt itchy as he coughed. After coughing a few times, his throat began to swell in pain and he could taste metal.
Look, I told you to be careful. Tracy must have spread all kinds of ailments around the ship. Once anyone approaches it, they'll quickly be infected with it and be exposed. With this wide of a range, it means that she has completely digested the Sequence 5 potion and has a chance of advancing to Sequence 4.
Anderson clenched his fists and held them to his mouth. He coughed lightly, but it wasn't as serious as Danitz's.
Why couldn't it be that she has already advanced to Sequence 4?
As he was far from the source of the infection, Danitz quickly recovered and instinctively retorted.
If that were the case, you are either on the Black Death, or you have a victim of the Black Death disease and are on your deathbed. Tracy must have used some sort of trick. It's unlikely for her to only be able to maintain the target area of the ailments to be at the front and not the other three directions. Instead, she used the wind to spread the ailments to affect the people on the shore.
Anderson half-turned his body and cast his gaze towards the obstructed beach. With that said, Anderson clapped his hands and smiled again.
Isn't our encounter proof that Vice Admiral Ailment is on the ship? You can inform Gehrman Sparrow.
Danitz didn't hesitate any further. He immediately set up a ritual and summoned the messenger. Using the excuse of guarding the area to prevent any accidents, Anderson walked out of the forest. It was 3 in the morning in Backland's East Borough. Apart from the moonlight and starlight, it was pitch black. Wearing cotton pajamas and a sleeping cap with a protective hairnet, Klein sat on the bed and received the letter from Renette Tinneker without asking anything. Opening the letter, he calmly got out of bed, took out a pen from his pocket, and wrote on the back of the letter, "Return to the port city and await further instructions." After watching Miss Messenger leave, he calmly changed into his shirt, put on his vest, tied his bow tie, and put on his black trench coat. Then he took 4 steps counterclockwise and went above the gray fog. Using the topaz spirit pendulum to divine the danger level of this operation, he received almost no revelations. Without any hesitation, he returned to the real world and stood in front of the mirror. He picked up his half-top hat and wore it above his head. On the bunk bed in the room outside, Kyuiknos and Enuni opened their eyes. Maxens quaes point tai, axensai point. In an empty room on the Black Death, a figure quickly outlined itself. He had black hair and brown eyes with cold and hard facial features. He was none other than Gehrman Sparrow. Under the dim crimson moonlight, Klein swept his gaze and casually found a chair to sit down as he admired the sea vista outside. In the captain's cabin 1 level away, Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy, who was dressed in a white blouse and beige pants, watched Bartz leave the room in disgust. She pulled at her collar out of reflex, and her expression turned livid. She had just learned that Blazing Danitz and the strongest Hunter Anderson had been staying in Theros Island recently with unknown motives.
They're all related to Gehrman Sparrow. Is that fellow looking for me?
Tracy narrowed her eyes as she walked towards the window without any hesitation. She was prepared to instruct the sailors on the deck to steer the ship away from these waters. At this moment, her thoughts suddenly turned sluggish. It was as if she had sunken into a state where she knew she was in a dream, but was unable to extricate from it, no matter how hard she struggled.
Not good.
Black flames abruptly emerged from the surface of Tracy's body, attempting to burn away any external influences. However, while the flames were initially able to flow smoothly, they later began to turn intermittent as they kept falling to the ground like withered petals. A strong sense of despair surged within Tracy as her thoughts turned increasingly slower. Desperate, she quickly condensed a layer of crystalline ice around her body, retracting the invisible threads towards her and wrapped herself in layers. At that moment, the door to the captain's cabin creaked open. Wearing a silk top hat and black trench coat, Gehrman Sparrow walked in. Then, he politely closed the door. With a light cracking sound, the entire captain's cabin instantly became extremely quiet. The sound of crashing waves was no longer present, as though they had been separated from the real world. As for the invisible spider webs that entangled Tracy, they seemed to misunderstand the order that was given as they tightly bound Vice Admiral Ailment up, preventing her from moving or using her beyond her powers. Distortion! As her thoughts returned to normal, her brain no longer felt frozen.
What do you want to do?
She couldn't hide her fear as she watched Gehrman Sparrow slowly approach. What she couldn't understand was why the other party would give up on the attempt to make a marionette, even though she had clearly lost her ability to resist. The reason why Klein did so was because he was worried that Vice Admiral Ailment and the Demoness of White were related by blood. This way, Tracy's death would cause the demigod who was good at hexes to sense something and take measures ahead of time. B. Tap! 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 Klein stopped in front of the Demoness. Chapter 1108 Messed Up Family. Gehrman Sparrow's silence made Tracy's heart sink, as though she had fallen into an ice cavern. When he saw despair surface on Vice Admiral Ailment's face, Klein took out a piece of paper from his pocket. With a flick of his wrist, he made it fly forward like a poker card. With a whoosh, the slip of paper cut through a tiny portion of the invisible spider webs like a piece of metal. It tore open the translucent ice crystal and lacerated Tracy's left arm, causing blood to splatter. The surface of the paper was quickly dyed with a bright red tinge, before it boomeranged back from the trapped demoness into Klein's palm. Tracy originally imagined that the piece of paper would come at her throat, but she never expected it to only target her arm. She was momentarily stunned. Only when Gehrman Sparrow folded the piece of paper and placed it into an iron cigar case did she suddenly realize something. She asked,
Your true target is Katerina.
Klein placed the iron cigar case back into his pocket without answering her. He calmly asked,
You are her descendant.
Upon hearing this, Tracy, who was still trapped by the ice crystal and spider silk, suddenly let out a low laugh.
I'm not just a descendant. I'm her child, daughter.
As Klein rejoiced over his caution in not recklessly killing her, causing Demoness of White Katerina to sense something, he subconsciously analyzed whether Katerina was the mother or father of the ailment maiden.
If Katerina was also formerly a male, it's possible that she's Tracy's father, but the problem is that she was already a Sequence 4 demigod during the Pale disaster that was at the end of the 4th epoch. And for the assassin pathway, a man will change into a woman at Sequence 7 Witch. In other words, if Katerina is Tracy's father, Tracy needs to be at least 1,300 years old. However, it's impossible for a Sequence 5 Beyonder to live for so long. Even most Sequence 4 and Sequence 3 saints aren't capable of that. There's only one answer, and that is that Tracy was born by Katerina. Also, it happened in the past few decades, an advanced maternal age of more than 1,000 years.
Klein nodded slightly and confirmed without any change in expression.
She's your mom.
Tracy's expression suddenly turned odd.
No, my mother.
Just as he was about to ask what was the difference between that and mother, since it was essentially a more formal and eloquent manner of speech, Tracy sneered and said,
My mom is another person. She used to be my father.
You demonesses have messed up families. But that isn't the reason why you spread catastrophes to the world.
Klein used his clown powers to control his facial muscles as he continued looking at ailment maiden, his face impassive. Tracy, who was already in a dire situation, was now beginning to abandon herself to despair. Without waiting for Gehrman Sparrow's response, she sighed and gave a self-deprecating laugh.
Maybe it was all a mistake since I was born. Abnormal parents, abnormal family relationship, abnormal sect members. They sculpted me and harmed me. At the age of 8, I found out that my father, who I had always admired as a role model, had suddenly become a woman. He was becoming like a dainty flower by the day, becoming more and more adept at using his charms. Later on, he even found a male friend and gave birth to my younger brother. Can you imagine that kind of feeling? After I ran away from home and came to the sea, I finally found a normal sense of self-recognition and a social identity after many years of hard work. I finally understood what I really wanted. Then, a potion bottle turned me into a woman. A woman.
After listening quietly, Klein said without changing his tone,
Your instigation skills are pretty good.
Tracy turned agape, but in the end, she only sighed and smiled with a complicated expression.
I admit that I was trying to win your sympathy. Everyone wants to live. Isn't that right? However, I didn't lie. That was my life experience.
She stopped exaggerating her pain and sadness and paused.
Before you kill me, I would like to ask you a question. It's a question that won't put you in a difficult spot.
What is it?
Klein looked at the demoness and asked. Tracy hesitated for a moment before finally asking,
Before you came to assassinate me the previous time, did Helene know about this?
Klein was silent for a moment before he said,
She didn't know what would happen.
Tracy's face suddenly glowed.
Really?
Before Gehrman Sparrow could respond, she revealed an extremely complicated expression.
Before I die, can I ask you for another favor? If you can see her again, tell her that I feel very guilty about what happened in the past, but I don't regret it.
At this point, Tracy tried to shake her head, but failed thanks to the restriction provided by the crystalline ice and invisible spiderwebs. She could only laugh at herself.
Forget it, there's no need to tell her. Let's leave it at that. You can do what you were here for.
With that, Tracy closed her eyes. After a few seconds, she didn't feel the pain she expected. Instead, she heard Gehrman Sparrow say in a deep voice,
Say this. No one is to disturb me.
Tracy was surprised as she felt perplexed, and it showed on her face. However, since she was already facing death, such a small matter wasn't worth nitpicking about. She opened her mouth and said,
No one is to disturb me.
As soon as she said the statement, the same voice echoed on the Black Death, greatly amplified. The pirates didn't have any doubts about this. It was as if they were following a specific pattern. They instinctively avoided the captain's cabin and continued their work. Since the captain said not to disturb her, they naturally wouldn't seek her out. At the same time, Tracy saw Gairman Sparrow take off his top hat and press it to his chest. He bowed slightly at her, as though he was bidding her farewell. Then she felt as though she was isolated from the entire world. There was silence. Even the crazy adventurer was gone. She had obtained the environment of not being disturbed just as she wanted. The magnify and distortion powers of the lawyer pathway. The layer of ice on Tracy's body began to melt, but the invisible spider webs continued to bind her firmly, preventing her from doing anything. She couldn't even change her center of gravity. Hence, she could only stand there like a lifelike wax statue.
He didn't kill me.
Tracy looked ahead blankly, momentarily in disbelief. She didn't believe that Gairman Sparrow hadn't taken action because he pitied her. This crazy adventurer had killed many pirates, and there had never been a situation where he showed mercy. As for Tracy, although she believed that she wasn't the typical demoness and didn't live up to her status as a demoness, how could she not have done anything bad as a pirate? She was experienced in both the slave trade and in plundering ships. Similarly, Tracy didn't believe that Gairman Sparrow was moved by her beauty and her experiences and had ended up coveting her because his cold gaze was like he was looking at a dead person.
There must be other factors. It's likely because of my blood relationship with Mother. As for demonesses, they're all good at hexes. Once I die, Mother will immediately notice it. When she discovers that there's a problem here, she will make preparations ahead of time, preventing Gairman Sparrow from finding his target during his subsequent actions. That's why he allowed me to live but made it impossible for me to contact anyone else. From the looks of it, regardless of the outcome of his operation targeted at Mother, he will return to kill me. And if I want to continue living, I have to succeed in saving myself before that happens.
In Tracy's heart, she didn't have much of a relationship with her mother, Katerina. This demoness of unaging had lived for a long time, and most of the time, she had maintained her youthful state of mind by dating young men. She was passionate about the occasional children that she had whenever she found it novel to have one. At other times, she was mostly indifferent. However, as she grew older, Katerina's evaluation of Tracy was that she resembled her past self more and more. Hence, she was doted on her and provided more help. However, Tracy didn't want such attention. It only served to make her lose her original gender, putting her into a painful situation that she couldn't shake off.
Phew. Although I hate her and blame her, I still unknowingly rely on her, hoping that she can respect my opinion more. I hope that she can escape Gairman Sparrow's pursuit.
Tracy once again began to struggle in an attempt to escape her bound state. On the one hand, she was trying to save herself. On the other hand, she wanted to inform her mother to be careful of Gairman Sparrow as soon as possible. Of course, Tracy found it questionable that Gairman Sparrow, who had likely advanced to Sequence 4 recently, would be able to harm her mother. She was, after all, someone who had survived since the 4th epoch, and was a demoness with the title of unaging. However, she didn't only pin this belief on hope alone. This was because Gairman Sparrow had helpers, such as the Death Consul who even her mother feared. Plop! Tracy finally collapsed on the ground and tried to roll towards the desk, but no matter how hard she tried, she was unable to roll her body. The person she was fighting against was none other than herself, she who had been distorted and magnified. Above the gray fog, Klein had already taken his seat in the high-backed chair of the fool. He placed the paper stained with Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy's blood on the surface of the long, mottled table. Following that, he conjured a pen and paper and wrote a divination statement.
Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy's mother, Katerina's current location.
Putting down the pen, he held the 2 pieces of paper and leaned back into his chair. He closed his eyes and repeated the words he had written. After repeating it 7 times, he entered a dream. He saw a tall and towering Gothic bell tower appear in the gray world. Around the bell tower, the white-robed Katerina stood in the shadows of a few houses. She observed the surroundings with a heavy expression, as though she was searching for something. As for the crimson moon hanging high in the sky, its position was identical to what he had seen before entering the gray fog. This meant that Demoness of White Katerina was still in Backland. She was in Westboro, in search of a particular target. Chapter 1109. Patience. After ending the divination and returning to the real world, Klein walked to the room outside the rental flat. There he pondered for nearly a minute while looking at the crimson moon in the night sky. He muttered silently.
Perhaps there's still another chance for digesting the potion.
He ultimately rummaged for something. He took the two marionettes and disappeared into the shadows. Dama. In Backland, he no longer dared to use Flaming Jump, afraid that it might catch Zaratul's notice. After all, it was impossible for him to always have an opportunity to ignite Willow Septon's paper crane to protect himself. This was a sign of disrespect towards the Snake of Fate, and it was easy for Dr. Aaron's family to be targeted if he kept visiting them. In the blink of an eye, Klein appeared at the back of the tall, Gothic-styled bell tower in his dream. He hid in the shadows, one formed by the Bell of Order, a symbol of Backland. Immediately following that, he and his two marionettes split apart, each occupying different hidden spots. After doing all of this, Klein quickly turned a rat into a marionette, allowing it to run to the edge of the range of his control. It opened its mouth and softly chanted an honorific name. The great god of war, the symbol of iron and blood, the ruler of chaos and strife. Demoness of White Katerina is in this area. Since Klein was fulfilling his agreement with the Red Angel evil spirit, he also hoped that this high-level creature would step into a trap that might possibly be for him. At the same time, he had some doubts about Sauron Einhorn Medici's true intentions. He had no intention of urgently getting help from the Church of Evernight or Queen Mystic. He planned on watching from the sidelines to confirm the situation, lest he implicated others into springing a trap. Just as the prayer ended, the gray rat suddenly twitched and fell quietly beside the rubbish bin. He Wadiway, Wadiye Asabul. It had already lost its life and was no longer Klein's marionette. This was a way to prevent himself from being marked by the Red Angel evil spirit. As for him, after giving up on that rat marionette, he immediately left the area where the Bell of Order was located with Cornus and Anuni. He also made the winner pray to sea god Calvetua a few kilometers away. After the prayer, the two of them continued to retreat, widening their distance. Then, Klein hid in a storage room in a particular house, took 4 steps counterclockwise, and went above the gray fog to sit at the position of the Fool. He then beckoned for the sea god's scepter. With the help of the prayer light of the winner, he expanded his scope and observed the target area. At the same time, with his other hand, he held the piece of paper that was stained with Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy's blood. With a medium like this and a general scope, it didn't take long under his true vision before he found the hidden demoness of White Katerina. The black-haired, blue-eyed woman was dressed in a pure white robe. She looked like a weightless feather, and she was gently drifting across the streets and alleys. Even if the patrolling policemen looked in the right direction, they were unable to detect her presence. If it wasn't for the gray fog's help, Klein could only use spirit body threads to see through the invisibility to a certain extent. Taking a deep breath, he patiently waited for the Red Angel evil spirit to appear. He also observed Katerina, wanting to know what she was looking for. He suspected that the Demoness of White was targeting Trissy Cheek. Seconds changed to minutes as the crimson moon gradually tilted to the side. Having wandered around the Bell of Order for a while without finding anything, Katerina revealed a slightly frustrated and disappointed expression. She looked as though she was about to leave that area at any time, and the Red Angel evil spirit never appeared.
Sauron Einhorn Medici was just lying to me. He really didn't have the Demoness of White as his goal. No, that's not necessarily the case. If that happened, then his condition would be meaningless. The Red Angel evil spirit has actually arrived at the scene, but has chosen not to immediately take action like me. He is waiting for the battle between Katerina and me and my companions to reach its most intense state before suddenly appearing to reap the greatest benefits.
Klein's thoughts wandered as he came up with a guess. Muntus. He suspected that the Red Angel evil spirit was as cautious, careful, and staid as he was. He hoped to be the fisherman pulling in the net, and not that net.
This is really troublesome. Next, it will depend on who's more patient.
Klein muttered silently as he continued to observe the situation around the Bell of Order through the prayer light. Tick, tick, tick. The second hand was beating at the same pace in the quiet night. Demoness of White Katerina's expression turned increasingly gloomy. Suddenly, she cast her gaze on the glass window of a building. The dim night was like a mirror reflecting the things in front of them. Katerina's beautiful blue eyes sparkled slightly as the surface of the mirror instantly turned dark, as though there were countless objects and layers of space hidden within. The glass window seemed to have become a passageway to an alternate world. With a thought, together with the various beyonder powers that Demoness Trissy had showcased, he suspected that Katerina was about to use the mirror world to leave this place and end her hunt tonight.
How can the Red Angel evil spirit still endure this?
Klein tensed up as he instinctively wanted to put down the sea god's scepter and return to the real world. He wanted to act against the Demoness of White and prevent her from leaving. As this thought flashed through his mind, he ultimately didn't move. He felt that he could still wait a little longer, because even if Katerina left the surrounding area of the Bell of Order, he could still locate her again as long as she didn't discover that something had happened to her daughter. When the time came, he could first summon a Rhodes to ask about the target's actual abilities and items. Then he could either seek the help of Queen Mystic Bernadette or the Church of Evernight to borrow a Grade 1 sealed artifact. He could then make the scales of victory tip towards him before taking action.
I deliberately didn't hide my operation this time. If I were to borrow a sealed artifact and the Archbishop assents to it, that means that the goddess's true attitude towards George III is, she doesn't like the king becoming the Black Emperor, but she can only accept it silently. If someone is willing to disrupt the ritual, she is willing to provide some help.
Klein calmed his slightly anxious feelings, allowing his observation to become more relaxed. At that moment, Demoness of White Katerina's expression returned to normal. She floated to the glass window and entered without any corporeal form. The layers of illusory worlds within the mirror converged as though they were constantly moving away. At this moment, using his true vision to observe the area underneath, Klein seemed to hear a shrill female scream. This cry seemed to come from another world. It contained extreme fear and disbelief. Max did come from another world. None of the residents in the surrounding area were jolted awake. No one heard anything.
That was Katerina's scream. What exactly happened to her?
Klein's gaze froze as he thought of something.
The Red Angel evil spirit is also an evil spirit, and it's also capable of using mirror blink, thus using this medium. In other words, he is no stranger to the mirror world. Could it be that Sauron Einhorn Medici had been hiding in the mirror all this time, waiting for the Demoness of White to throw herself into a trap?
As his pupils dilated, the darkness and gloominess in the glass window disappeared. The mirror had lost its unique characteristics and returned to its original state. A few seconds later, the bottom of the glass window slowly bled, forming a liquid that slid down. In the areas that the liquid passed, the surrounding grayish-white tint spread, covering its original pale yellow color. It was like a newly embedded stone. Drip, drip, drip! The drops of liquid landed on the ground, dyeing it bright red like blood, beautiful like flowers. Upon seeing this scene, the muscles on Klein's face twitched slightly before he forced himself to use his clown powers to control his expression.
This ending was really unexpected.
A powerful and senior Sequence 3 saint, one who had lived for more than 1,000 years, was unable to put up any resistance in front of the Red Angel evil spirit's trap. There was only silence left. As for Klein himself, even if he counted the 2 marionettes and the sealed artifacts he possessed, he was still a little weaker when compared to Katerina's strength. He needed to make up for this gap through prior preparations, Nevi Light. This also meant that, if he were to face the Red Angel evil spirit, he would probably not end up any better. He would similarly be powerless and puny, slowly sinking in the torrent that followed.
Is this what a former King of Angels is? Even though his strength has yet to recover to its peak state, it still leaves one in such despair.
Seeing the blood seeping out from the glass window gradually lessen, he took a deep breath and returned to the real world. Following that, he and Winter Inuni exchanged positions as he teleported to the glass window. When Bizarro sorcerers switched positions, they could only choose two, swapping their bodies and external objects. However, it was impossible to be too precise at his current level, so Klein wasn't able to leave behind whatever he wanted. He could only choose to leave everything, or not leave anything behind. And Nooni, who wore Gehrman Sparrow's appearance, said to the glass window in a deep voice the moment he materialized in front of it,
I have already fulfilled my promise.
A figure suddenly appeared on the glass window. Comotes. He was wearing a long black robe with red stripes. He casually wore a hood, revealing a soft outline. His skin was brown, and he had a pale face. He was the gatekeeper who had been possessed by Sauron Einhorn Medici. The young man walked down from the window and said with a smile,
Well done.
Upon hearing this, Klein took out something from his pocket. The corners of his mouth curled up as he happily replied.
You did well, too.
As he spoke, he blew at the monocle in his hand and wore it on his left eye. Sauron Einhorn Medici's smile froze. Chapter 1110, Spirit Channeling. For a moment, the cold night became abnormally scorching hot, as though invisible lava was surging within it. However, everything quickly returned to normal. Noor, the Red Angel evil spirit, sized up Klein and smiled as if nothing had happened.
I'll say it again. You have talent in being a provoker. Back when Zaratul digested the Bizarro sorcerer potion, even he didn't dare to pretend to be Amon in front of me.
There wasn't a hint of anger in his tone. He didn't mention why Zaratul didn't dare to do so, but with his gaze sweeping across Klein, it was as if he had fallen deep inside a glacier, his body freezing in the process. This was how his actual body felt. Even though he was separated by a marionette, the back of his neck and back still had goosebumps. Without needing Sauron Einhorn Medici to say anything else, Klein understood the hidden meaning behind his words.
Anyone who dared to use such a method to scare him would suffer the punishment of steel and blood on the spot.
Looking at the Red Angel evil spirit in front of him, who had a converged aura but was giving off a feeling of an extremely high level of superiority, Klein couldn't help but inwardly mutter,
If it wasn't for the fact that the Bizarro sorcerer potion had been digested to a certain extent, I would have thought that your willpower was as strong as steel and that your strength has returned to the level of at least a sequence 1. And now, I can basically confirm that, under your calm demeanor, you're hiding a strong fear towards Aemon. This also means that your current level is at most at sequence 2. Besides, I was already mentally prepared to lose a marionette. In order to quickly digest the potion, I had to take the risk. If Danitz was here and he was given the opportunity to shout out coward twice, he could probably quickly digest the provoker potion even if he had drunk 4 or 5 bottles.
Without further agitating the Red Angel evil spirit, Klein smiled and took off the monocle.
Back in the Solomon Empire, Zaratul should already be an angel. How would he still need to digest the Bizarro sorcerer potion?
I'm talking about the young Zaratul.
Sauron Einhorn Medici said casually.
This is consistent with the description from the grandpa in Leonard's body.
Klein nodded indiscernibly and focused on the main topic at hand.
You've already finished off the Demoness of White?
The Red Angel evil spirit laughed and said,
What do you think? Also, one must be polite. Since Katarina calls herself the Saintess of White, then you shouldn't call her a demoness anymore.
Polite. A hunter emphasizing manners with me.
At that instant, the corners of Klein's mouth twitched, expressing the ludicrousness of the matter, but he ultimately held back.
From the looks of it, provoking isn't limited to ridiculing and cursing others. Danitz, who only knows how to curse using one word, is a disgrace to hunters.
As he thought, Klein said,
I've already fulfilled my promise. I think you don't mind giving me a small reward.
Reward?
The Red Angel evil spirit scoffed and asked. Klein ignored his attitude and continued.
I wish to communicate with the Demoness of White. I want to ask her something.
Just this request?
The Red Angel evil spirit asked in amusement. Klein nodded.
That's right.
No problem.
Sauron Einhorn Medici raised his right hand and grabbed at his glabella. From there, a blurry figure was pulled out. It was none other than Saintess of White Caterina, whose facial expression was filled with horror.
Can we have a private conversation?
Seeing this, Klein looked around. The Red Angel evil spirit immediately laughed and said,
Do you need a room where the two of you can be together? Think about it with that brain of yours. Even if you want to hide the questions you would like to raise from me, I can still find out through Katerina's spirit. That is, of course, unless you don't plan on returning her to me. Or, are you a little boy who needs things to follow a ritual?
Klein made the marionette reply with a deadpan expression.
I have a way to make her forget my questions.
This was both the truth and a lie. The truth was that he could use Hveen manipulators beyond her characteristic to complete the job. However, it was relatively difficult, and the chance of failure was very high. Furthermore, the negative effects weren't minor. The reason why he lied was because he had no intention of doing so. This would expose many important matters. He only had one purpose in saying this, to make the Red Angel evil spirit suspect that the answers obtained weren't the truth, and that there were key hidden parts beneath the surface. From that, he would ignore the value of the answers obtained on the surface. This worked wonders on people who were highly suspicious. Of course, there was no hope of success. After all, the entity opposite him was the Red Angel, who was master of conspiracies.
Not bad.
After Sauron Einhorn Medici heard Klein's reply, his body suddenly vanished, projecting itself onto the glass window. Klein glanced at the blood that had already coagulated on the gray stones, feeling somewhat wistful as he brought the somewhat muddle-headed demoness of White Caterina far away from the glass and into a dark alley. He then took out candles, essential oils, and herbal powders. He set up an altar and prayed to the Evernight goddess, hoping that he could use ritualistic magic to complete the mediumship. This was a skill he had mastered when he was still a Nighthawk. As the ritual was completed, an immense and terrifying power descended from an indescribable height, causing the surroundings to become unusually quiet. Klein's eyes instantly darkened, as it was like the dark night was compressed. He then saw more things around Katerina's spirit, flickering light and blurry mindstorms. He easily passed through those obstacles and faced the demoness of White's body of heart and mind. Without being careless, Klein began from a less sensitive question to observe Katerina's condition.
Has the cooperation between the demoness sect and George III come to an end?
The dazed and confused look on Katerina's face faded a little as she nodded with a pure smile.
Yes.
Klein asked further.
Then why are you still in Backlund?
Katerina replied solemnly.
I'm in pursuit of Trissy. She took an important sealed artifact from us.
What's the sealed artifact?
Klein suddenly recalled the sapphire ring that Demoness Trissy had once worn on her hand. It was intricately made. No, Demoness of White, Katerina said, with a pious expression.
It has something to do with the awakening of Primordial. Apart from its high level at grade 0, it doesn't have any special abilities.
Indeed, it has to do with the Primordial Demoness. You people even changed Trissy's name to Trissy Cheek.
Klein didn't reveal that he knew the true name of the Primordial Demoness. Instead, he asked,
Do you know where the other 8 mausoleums of George III are?
Katerina frowned slightly and answered in a manner meant to garner sympathy.
They're separately located in the southwest suburbs of Backlund-Awa County, Eastchester County.
This Demoness of White first gave a simple account of the locations of the 8 mausoleums before introducing their specific locations and situations in detail.
The 8 mausoleums have already been repaired. They temporarily deactivated the teleportation tunnel. Even if they have the corresponding charms, there's no way to open them again. It's almost impossible to find them directly from the outside world. Other than Prince Grove, Duchess Georgina, the two angels of the royal family, and George III, no one else can enter.
Well, some of those places were places where Q.S. Kilgore often went hunting, so it matches my guess. This means that the Demoness of White isn't lying. I'll make a confirmation above the gray fog later. If this is really the case, it would be quite troublesome. With the current situation, be it Prince Grove or Duchess Georgina, they would definitely be in the sights of the angels. Ugh, Lee, the biggest hurdle is entering the ruins. Once entry is gained, what follows won't be that dangerous. War has already broken out, and there's a need to fight against the Phasacians. Demigods are a limited resource, so there's no way George III can have every ruin be guarded by a saint, with the option of an angel to provide reinforcements.
As Klein's thoughts raced, he first posed a question.
The royal family has two angels?
Katerina replied honestly.
In fact, that's not the case. It's very likely that George III is also one. One of those two angels is the founder of the Lowen Kingdom, Protector William I, who has survived since the Fourth Epoch. He is a Sequence 1 Hand of Order of the Arbiter pathway, while the other is the former Duke of Southfield, D-Link Augustus. He is a Sequence 2 Balancer. As for how many Grade 0 sealed artifacts the royal family has, I'm not sure.
The founder on the 10-pound note is still alive. I have the feeling that history has seeped into reality again.
After some thought, he nodded and asked,
Why are you working with George III?
Katerina's expression became a little excited. Conqueror was the name of the Red Priest Pathway's Sequence 1 potion.
For a Conqueror Beyonder characteristic, it's already in our hands.
Klein asked thoughtfully.
Then, will it belong to the primordial demoness, or belong to the upper echelons of your sect? Who are the higher-ups of your sect?
Katerina answered truthfully.
It will be sacrificed to primordial. However, we have to find the sealed artifact that Trissy took away first. Currently, it has been kept by the Saintess of Black. All the higher-ups of our sect have colors as their code names.
After understanding more details, Klein terminated the spirit channeling, cleaned up the altar, and allowed the Demoness of White's spirit to return to the glass window from before. As for himself, his body suddenly turned transparent. With the help of teleportation, he disappeared from this region, rendezvousing with his actual body and his other marionette. After watching Gehrman Sparrow leave, the gloominess and confusion on Katerina's face suddenly vanished as her expression became extremely astute. She then entered the glass window, which had turned dark again. A few seconds later, Sauron Einhorn Medici and Demoness of White Katerina walked out of the mirror together. The latter's figure was clear and filled with flesh. She showed no signs of death. The Red Angel Evil Spirit stroked his chin and turned to ask Katerina.
Are you saying that he was asking about the other 8 secret mausoleums of George III? The power of the spirit channeling came from Evernight?
The Demoness of White nodded slightly and said,
That's right.
The Red Angel Evil Spirit immediately laughed. Katerina's eyes darted around as she revealed a smile.
So he doesn't want George III to become the Black Emperor.
But it's impossible to succeed. No matter how fast he advances or how much help he receives, there's no way he can resist the combined forces of the royal family, the military, and that organization. No, if it's just the Augustus family, with his level and strength, he won't be able to do anything, unless Evernight personally descends.
Having said that, this Demoness of White asked in a seemingly casual manner,
I'm very puzzled. Why didn't you kill me directly after grasping the absolute advantage over me?
The Red Angel Evil Spirit glanced at her as the corners of his mouth slowly curled up.
Do you think you have the right to be my true target?